Okay, Ryan Ham here, and what we are going to do today is we're going to talk about different types of corrosion and how I remove them. And not going to be a catch-all, not going to be a be-all, but I'm just going to kind of go over different types of corrosion. Uh, I like to categorize corrosion. There's a couple of different types. Surface corrosion, there's what we call pitting corrosion, and then there's different like intensities. Stuff that you might see on guns will fall into several categories, and if you want to protect your gun, the best thing you can do is oil it with a good quality oil. I use Break Free. I get this little applicator bottle and I just keep on filling it up. I buy little quart bottles of Break Free. That's Break Free CLP. CLP stands for Cleaner, Lubricant, and Protectant. And it does a good enough job for me. I'd say you should be taking your guns out at least once before and one after hunting season if you're a hunter. If you're a collector, I would say annually, at least once. Take a gun out and wipe it down on the outside. Make sure it's not got any corrosion starting on it. You also want to ensure that you're storing your guns in a dry place if you live in a humid climate like I do. Here's some more surface corrosion. This is the bolt of a Mossberg 500. And that surface corrosion is definitely something that you want to be getting rid of just to make your gun look good. And if you leave it on the surface there, it's going to keep on growing deeper. As an extreme example, I've got a slide here, and you can see that this slide is pretty well pitted. And what rust does is it continues to eat away at the surface for long periods of time, and it'll continue to eat and eat, and eventually it'll eat through, and you naturally don't want that. And if you've got a gun that's corroded this badly, you don't want to shoot it. You could see right in there where it's actually eaten through the thin metal on that little sleeve, and it's gone all the way through. But if you've got something like this, I've already cleaned this up using non-destructive methods, and I'll show you some of those methods. You can get all the rust off, but if the underlying metal is damaged too much, naturally you don't want to use it. So we'll get right into my tools. For removing any type of rust, the main thing that you want is you want something that's either as hard as or harder than the rust. In the base material, you want it to be softer than the base material. Well, rust is fairly soft, it's fairly crumply, so I have found that pennies are wonderful. This happens to be a 1967 penny, and that's important because American pennies that were made before 1981, I like to have 1980 or earlier, were all copper. So they're copper through and through. The pennies since then are what we call clad, and they have a nickel core, and then they're just copper plated. You don't want those because the nickel can be harder than your base metals, and you don't want to scratch up your base metals. So what you want to do is essentially you want to scrape the rust with the penny, and I don't have it lubricated now, but you want a little bit of Break Free on that in order to do that. And what that'll do is that'll take the rust off, and it'll even get down into some pretty nasty rust. You can see some in here that's fairly deep, and you can get at that with some fairly heavy scrubbing. If you have a pair of tin snips, you can cut the penny in half, and then that gives you a flat surface to work with. Otherwise, I just kind of turn the penny on its side and kind of scrape like this, and that'll get most of it. And you'll see it come up for the most part when I start working here. I also have some other tools. I've got a brush, a bristle brush that's got steel bristles. Now, You don't want to do that on blued parts unless you absolutely have to. But you can do it on parts that aren't blued. This is called bare metal. It's not stainless. It's shiny. It doesn't have any bluing on it. And generally you'll see this in the bolts on the firearms and some of the internal parts. They just don't blue because they figure they're going to be oiled up all the time. And on this you can actually take and scrub. What you want to do is you'll see a grain where they've polished it generally in this direction for a bolt. And you want to go with the grain, so you always want to do this way, this direction. That way you don't get any cross hatching on the metal. Now you'll see it's already taking off a lot of that corrosion on the surface. Now there may be discoloration underneath, and you just have to scrub harder with that. I mean, most of it will come up. Don't over clean. If you have rust, just remove the rust. If there's discoloration, you can go there, but one of the major causes of damage to guns is people over cleaning. The worst thing you can do for a gun is to take sandpaper to it, because you're going to completely ruin the finish and any value that gun might have in terms of collector's value. You're no longer taking off rust. What you're doing is you're completely ruining the finish, so don't do that. The sides, this is a lifter on a Mossberg 500. The sides of it have some corrosion on it, as well as the bottom, and that's just poor maintenance. People aren't taking care of their guns, and hate to see that. But if the gun is all rusted up like this and somebody doesn't want to take the time to do it themselves, I could talk them down and generally get it for a decent price and put a little effort and work into it and make it look pretty nice. And on the other end, somebody will buy it, hopefully, for more than I've paid for it. So what I'm going to do is one other thing, steel wool. You want to get, I believe this is either quadruple aught or triple aught steel wool. You don't want to scrub too much with this, but what you want to do is you want to scrub just enough to get the surface corrosion off, and you should be good. I always soak it with some Break Free. One other thing you can use is I've got a 22 cartridge, and I've got it clamped in a pair of vice grips, and what I'll do with this is to get some leverage on some hard areas. Hold it so that only the cartridge is showing, and then you can scrape it. You can hear it. You don't want that sound. What you want to do is you want to lube it up. I'm just kind of demonstrating the way I do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of some of the rust here, just like I normally would. You can watch. I'll maybe talk through it, and we'll try and make this look a little more presentable. All right. So here I go. So just a little bit of oil. Just get it on there. Use your fingers, and the fingers will also help you because you'll be able to feel where the rust is. Don't go easy on this. You can use a good bit of it. It'll also soak down into the rust and kind of help break it up. Your fingers are going to get oily. Don't worry about it. You can use gloves, but what I've found is that it's hard when you're using gloves to actually feel what you're doing. So it may sound bad, but it's not hurting the surface metal. What it'll do is it'll deposit a little bit of copper on there. But the nice thing about Break Free is Break Free has a copper solvent, so it'll take the copper completely off of there with just a little bit of rubbing with your thumb, and that is already completely, I don't know if you could tell, that's already completely rust free, and the underlying metal has been damaged by the rust a little bit, but it wasn't damaged at all by the penny. And that's just a couple of seconds. So let me go around, and I'm just going to roll this, get into the big areas. You don't have to do too much. I mean, it really goes fast. And when we're done here, you'll see that there is some bluing missing. Not that big of a deal, but the reason that bluing is missing is not because you've been rubbing it with a penny. I can rub this all day and it won't hurt the surface any. And I'm feeling that, and I'm not feeling any rust at all. So what I'm going to do is take a rag here and wipe it down. Okay, I said I wasn't feeling any rust. There is still some on there, but not a whole lot. And what I'll do is I'll just go and hit little spots that I could feel it at, and often rub back with my fingers to get little bits of it. And some of it you have to be, there are scratches in the metal. If there's scratches in the metal, you could see it. It's pretty obvious. I haven't found one yet, but what it'll do is it'll grab and pull at the copper. And you can see that little bitty chunk there. Hopefully it'll focus. But you can see a little bitty chunk there of rust. And okay, you stupid thing, you're not focusing. Okay, so just roll it as you're hitting it with the penny, and it's all going away. I mean, it was that quick for the big areas, just a little bit more, and you can see, especially if you got a good strong light source, like I've got the light I use for the videos here, but if you've got a good strong light source, you could see. If you don't, you're going to be able to feel all that rust because it's sitting up off the surface of the metal. Okay, so that's mostly done. And when it's at that point, when it's mostly done and there's only a few other spots, you can even out the finish and take any residual copper that you have off with the steel wool. Okay, so I'm at that point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the steel wool, just put a dab or two of oil on there, and just kind of rub it as you turn. If this is round, of course, this is good for a barrel or a magazine tube, as the case is here. And that's going to take all of the surface rust off, and any residual copper that you might have had on there. So I'm going to go ahead and do this here as well. What you can also do, and this up here is not too bad, you can also just use the steel wool. But when you're using the steel wool, you're taking, because steel is as hard as the bluing, you're also going to be taking some of the bluing off, which this is a magazine tube. It's already got some bluing missing. Not that big of a deal. Don't do this dry. You always want to have Break Free or some other good quality cleaner lubricant and protectant. The reason I like Break Free again is because it's got a copper solvent in it, and it takes the copper off after you've used it. So I'm feeling as I go, I'm feeling around. I could feel little bits of the steel wool, and that's okay. And that's all going to come off with the rag. And then for threads, you want to go the opposite direction and take, okay, you can see what I'm doing there. All right, so that is about as clean as it's going to get. Again, I'm not going to overdo it. You remember what it looked like to begin with, and you'll be able to see what it looks like here in a second with everything off. And if you have any other areas that are left, like I could feel an area right there, and then I'm going to hit with the copper again. You could use copper pipe, any source of copper basically. Just make sure it's pure copper. Brass does not work too well. It is not as hard as steel, but I think I've found that brass will embed little bits of other things in it, and that'll tend to mar up your surface quicker than pure copper will. Copper pennies are preferable. Just whenever you get change, look for the penny-looking copper pieces, or the copper-looking penny pieces. They have a different look. They kind of got a weirder look if they're clad. You want to just take all those home with you. So I'm pretty much done there. That's pretty much all you need. Don't go overboard. If you go overboard, what you're going to tend to do is take too much of the finish off, and then it's just going to look weird. So I'll go ahead and do this part right here. Rub the rub the oil into it to let it soak a little bit. And I'm going to use a different method here. I'm going to try so you can see. And it doesn't take too long. Just be patient. If you are impatient, you're going to use means that are going to be damaging to the base metal. As you can see, it's still discolored. I'm okay with the discoloring. You know, what I'm not okay with is having pitting, and I don't see any pitting down here. That was all just surface corrosion, and I'm not okay with actual active rust or any kind of a brown color to it. So I'm gonna take this off as well. Sorry, keep hitting the camera there. Okay, so that's the majority of that is off. You're still going to have some discoloration. Now, don't use chemical products like navel jelly. It'll take the rust off, but it'll also discolor the metal. Don't do that. Navel jelly is a big no-no. There's rust and blue remover that you can use, but I wouldn't use that either. It's already rusted. It's already going to be discolored. All you're trying to do is take the rust off and keep the rust from continuing. So that is all you really need. One thing you can use is a Flitz metal polish. I have a couple of different types of polishes that I like, and that'll shine it up some and take some of the discoloration out. But right there, that's very smooth, and all the rest is gone. I'm going to stop there, and I'm just going to continue on with the next part. And that's this bolt, trying to get the corrosion off of that. And then I'll show you how to get some irregular surfaces, and I'll let you go. Alright, so again, the trick is you don't want to be rubbing steel on steel unless there's a lubricant in between and something to carry away the rust particles. So in that case, that's Break Free here. Now these are dirty too, so it's also gonna, you know, some of this black stuff here is just carbon, and I'll clean it all up later. I'm just trying to get the bulk of the rust off initially. Okay, so if you notice, I'm going with the polish pattern on the metal. It was polished at the factory this way, and I'm trying not to go against that, or else you'll have scratches. And I know you can't tell how it feels, but it's certainly a lot better than it was. Okay, so you'll see, if you remember what it did look like. And I'm not sure if you could see too much discoloration there. I could see it, but you know, the light's kind of harsh in here, so that's all you need to do. Other than cleaning up the rest of the bolt naturally, there's some more corrosion on top. I'll hit that later. But that's about all you need to do. This is going to be showing out the side of the gun, and it's going to be clean, and it's going to be lubed, and there's not going to be any active rust on it, and that discoloration is just going to be fine. If you want any better than that, again, you can polish it for a half an hour with the wire brush. As long as you continue to go in that direction, it's not going to be quite as noticeable because it was originally polished in that direction. So you should be fine. Now on a highly polished surface, you can go back over it with metal polish of some sort. Don't use a Dremel. Don't use a wire wheel. Don't use any mechanical, any electric or, you know, drills or grinders or any of that stuff. You don't need that, because all we're doing is cleaning here. We're cleaning the rust off. We're not refinishing it. All right, so on irregular surfaces like this, you can use the wire brush. But there's another type of wire brush, and that's a bronze bristle brush. That's a little bit easier, and you'll notice, well, you might not notice in the video, but it'll discolor the metal a little bit, and that's because it's got a copper element to it, and that copper is going to cause the metal to look a little bit bronzy. So you can use that. Same thing though. Always use the Break Free. Always get a little bit on that area, and that you're gonna work on. And I'll do that. Now you'll notice that just putting the oil on it helps. I'm going to use a bronze brush here, and that'll also get a lot of the gunk down in the corners off. Don't overdo it. Again, the reason we're not overdoing it is because we don't want to remove the finish on the metal or any of the metal. We just want to get the corrosion off the surface. Now this brush happens to be big enough. You can also use the cleaning brushes for guns, the bronze cleaning brushes for your guns. You can also use those, but it's going to deposit all that bronze, and you'll want to go back and you want to take all that off with your Break Free, because the Break Free again has a copper solvent. So now some of that was arguably some of that was just old oil and fouling, but the rag has got enough of the Break Free in it that it's taking some of the color off, but you go back and you'll be able to get the rest of that. Okay, so if you remember what it looked like initially, get down into the corner there, put a little more of the Break Free on here and try and get it a little more. Okay. Alright, so there's still more here. I'm going to work on it some more later. If you can tell, that's all we're looking for. All the rest is gone. All the fouling is gone. There's a nice coat of lubricant protectant on it. The cleaner portion of it, the CLP, it has that copper solvent in it. I believe it's ammonia based, and that will dissolve the copper that you're using from your bronze brush, or from your penny, or from your cartridge case. It doesn't take too long. If I'm doing a Mossberg 500, which is a gun I'm very familiar with, if I'm doing a Mossberg 500 that's heavily rusted like this one was, it should take me about an hour start to finish cleaning and everything. I'm filming this, so it takes a little bit longer, but you know, and that's even set up and take down, and I can watch TV while I'm doing it, so it's not too bad. If you're doing a gun for the first time, take your time. Again, go easy on it. You just want to get rid of the rust. You don't want to go any deeper than that. You don't want to completely ruin your gun. Never use sandpaper. Never use a Dremel tool. Never use a die grinder. Don't completely ruin a gun, because you know, it's going to lose all of its value. Now this tube was, if you remember, this tube was very bad to start with. There's still some areas where it's missing the finish, and that was where the rust had a chance to go all the way through the metal and eat a little bit. But it's not too bad. You get a little bit of discoloration here. Not too bad. I'm going to call that good. I'm going to put it back on the gun. It's going to be under the handguard anyways. And that gun will shoot for 100 years with no problems, because the surface it was affected, but the base metal was not at all. So you should be fine. All right, there's Round Ham's tips for cleaning guns. And if you do this, again, about annually, you'll be just fine. And what you don't want to end up with is a 90-year-old gun. A 90-year-old gun like this that looks like this. 90 years, this gun can still look like this. All right. Goodbye.